Hey guys, let's go ahead and do these 4 problems. So, number 1, we've got x sine 2x. So we have algebra and trig, lie 8. So we've got f of x is equal to x, f prime of x is equal to 1, g prime of x is equal to sine 2x. So g of x is equal to 1/2, and it's negative cosine, so that's negative 1/2 cosine 2x. Alright, so we've got our first part, f of x, g of x. So negative 1/2 x cosine 2x that we want to evaluate from 0 to pi over 4. And we got to take care of that first. And then you've got minus the integration from 0 to pi over 4 of the negative 1/2 cosine 2x, so the g and the f prime. So negative 1/2 cosine 2x dx. Alright, so I'm going to take care of this first. So you plug in a pi over 4 first. So you got 1/2 pi over 4 cosine of 2 times pi over 4. Remember, 2 times pi over 4 is just going to be pi over 2. So I'm going to just go ahead and erase that, save paper, and make that pi over 2. And then minus the negative 1/2 times 0, and then I don't care about the rest, because when I get that times 0, I don't have to worry about it. Be careful when you're plugging the zeros into the trig, because remember, 0 in trig isn't always 0. But if you're multiplying it by 0, then the whole thing's 0 anyway. So we end up with negative 1/2 times pi over 4 is a negative pi over 8 times cosine of pi over 2. Oh, hey, look, that's 0. So we're done with that section. So yay! That thing just all canceled out. So now let's look over here. We got to integrate this. So we get negative 1/2 times a 1/2 times the integration of cosine is sine. And then you've got 2x, and we want to evaluate that from 0 to pi over 4. Alright, so we've got a negative 1/4 sine of 2 times pi over 4, remember, was pi over 2, minus that negative 1/4 sine of 2 times 0 is 0. Alright, so sine of pi over 2 is equal to 1. So if this is equal to 1, then this is a negative 1/4. And sine of 0 is equal to 0, so that's just going away. So don't forget this little guy right here. You've got 0 minus a negative 1/4, which gives you your positive 1/4 for an answer. Okay, so that's number 1. All right, number 2, the integration from 1 to e of ln x over x squared dx. And I told you to go ahead and bring that x squared to the top. Don't forget that it's negative when you pull it up to the top. Okay? Fix this here. Alright, so this is your L, this is your A. Lie 8, L comes first. So ln x is your f of x, f prime of x is equal to 1 over x, g prime of x is equal to x to the negative 2. So when you're taking the integration of that, it's going to be x to the negative 1 over negative 1. Which when I put it up here in the equation, I'll make that negative 1 over x. Maybe I won't. I'll make it negative x to the negative 1 because I'm going to have to evaluate. So anyway, we've got f of x, g of x. So f of x is ln x. This is a negative 1 over x. Because I'm going to evaluate that, I am going to put that in as a negative ln x over x. And I want to evaluate that from 1 to e. Minus the integration from 1 to e of negative x to the negative 2. Because you've got f prime of x and you've got g of x. So if we look at that, so that's negative 1 over x times a 1 over x. So that's going to give me negative 1 over x squared. And negative 1 over x squared is a negative x to the negative 2. Okay, and this I'm going to have to integrate, which is why I made that an exponent. This I'm going to evaluate, which is why I put it on the bottom. So you plug in your e first, 1 ln e over e minus ln 1 over 1. Well, we know ln 1 is equal to 0, so that whole thing is gone. You know that ln e is equal to 1, so you end up with negative 1 over e minus a 0 in this case. I think there was a negative there, so it would be plus a 0. Doesn't really matter because it's 0. So we hold on to that and we go ahead and do this over here. So the integration of that is negative x to the negative 1 over negative 1 again. So we end up with 1 over an x positive from 1 to e. So you end up with 1 over e minus a 1 over 1. Don't forget your negative here. So negative 1 over e minus the parentheses of 1 over e plus 1, because that minus sign is going to distribute. Oops, getting to the end of the paper here. There we go. So a negative 1 over e minus a 1 over e is a negative 2 over e. And then the plus 1, which is the answer that I gave you on the paper. Okay. All right. The next one. All right, so the next one, we're back up here, 3. We have ln of 3x minus 2dx. Now, the reason I gave you this one without the intervals here is because I wanted you to practice that magic thing that we have to do. So this is only an L, so if it's f of x, ln of 3x minus 2. So f prime is equal to 1 over 3x minus 2 times 3. Don't forget the chain rule. G prime of x is just equal to 1, so g of x is equal to x. Okay? So we end up with f of x, g of x. So that's x ln of 3x minus 2 minus the integration of g of x, f prime of x. So we get the 3 and x that are on top, and the 3x minus 2 on the bottom. Now, just like we did yesterday, remember, we would love it if the top was 3x minus 2 because the bottom is 3x minus 2, and then they would cancel out. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a minus 2 and a plus 2. So it's like we're adding 0 to that. So we can break that up into 3x minus 2 over 3x minus 2 plus the integration of 2 over 3x minus 2. Because this one is just 1. Okay? So the integration of 1 is just x. The integration of this is u substitution. U is equal to 3x minus 2. Du dx is equal to 3. So you're integrating 2 over u du over 3. So that's 2/3 1 over u. So that's 2/3, not 3. 2/3 ln of u, which is 3x minus 2. This plus sign is right here. This minus sign comes down and distributes. So all my little arrows here. We've got x ln of 3x minus 2 to start, minus your x, and then minus goes with that, minus the 2/3 ln of 3x minus 2 plus c. Okay? All right, our last one. So number 4. We had the integration from negative 1 to 1 of ln of x plus 2. I think I have that as parentheses dx. All right, so this one's very similar as number 3, but we've got this negative 1 to 1. So we're just adding a little extra to it to go ahead and get our answer. So f of x is equal to ln of x plus 2. So f prime is equal to 1 over x plus 2 times 1. Don't have to worry about that. G prime of x is equal to 1, and g of x is equal to x. So we start f of x, g of x. X ln of x plus 2, which we want to evaluate from -1 to 1, minus the integration from -1 to 1 of your g of x and your f prime of x. So x over x plus 2. All right, so let's evaluate this first. It's 1, ln of 1 plus 2 is 3, minus a -1 times the ln of 1. Well, we know the ln of 1 is 0, so this is going to go away to 0, and you just end up with ln 3. Okay? So that finishes this over here. So now we do this one. With this one, again, you can't use u substitution here because u substitution doesn't work. Derivative of x is 1, so it's not going to cancel that out. But remember, if you had that plus 2 and then the minus 2, it would make it the integration of x plus 2 over x plus 2 plus the integration of a -2 over x plus 2. So this becomes 1. Make sure you're making it 1. Make sure you're not like canceling it out to be nothing. Make sure you keep it as 1. Now, when you integrate 1, it becomes x. When you integrate this, you need u substitution. You might be good at the u substitution. Maybe you can hear my dog. Hopefully she doesn't bark. She's running around in here. Du dx is equal to 1. So it's going to end up being -2 ln of u, which is x plus 2. We want to evaluate this from -1 to 1. So we plug a 1 in first. 1 minus 2 ln of 3. And then we're going to plug in a -1 next. So you've got minus -1 minus 2 ln of 1. Now, ln of 1 is 0, so this part goes away, but this -1 doesn't go away. Okay? So, we also can't forget this negative right here. So we got all sorts of things popping around. I'm going to simplify this, and then I'm going to pull that negative back down. So I've got 1 minus 2 ln 3 minus a negative, so that's plus 1. So that gives me 2 minus 2 ln 3. Okay? Now I can pull this negative down. Now I can pull this ln 3 down. So ln 3 minus the parentheses of this, so minus 2 plus 2 ln 3. Now that wasn't quite the answer, so again, for like multiple choice, you got to think these two are going to combine together. ln 3 plus 2 ln 3 equals 3 ln 3 minus 2, which is the answer that I gave you on the practice problem sheet. All right, so that finishes up today. Tomorrow we're going to start a new lesson. I do believe, I'll have to double check, but I do believe that it is one lesson and then you've got your homework, but you'll have all weekend to do it. So you'll get your lesson and you'll do your homework, and then we'll reconvene on Monday with a new thing. If you guys haven't finished up section 7.1 homework, or let me know by going into Google Classroom and answering that question, please go ahead and do so, just so that I know who's on board, who's doing everything that we're doing, and who's not. All right. Hope you guys have a good night, and I will talk to you tomorrow.